day. This would have been maybe an hour after the huge throngs would have been coming through, but still a tremendous number of runners who were coming in at approximately the 5-hour mark or so from running the marathon. People still applauding them. It's always a lot of fun to hang along the street down there when this first initial explosion ripped through the area, looked like right there in front of Marathon Sports. Then seconds later, a second one up near Mass Ave.
And we do know right now, as you said, Copley Square being cleared. The Fairmont Copley Plaza Hotel is in lockdown. Thankfully, there were so many medical personnel right there in the medical tent, so people could be treated on the scene, but we have seen multiple ambulances and other emergency vehicles taking people away from the scene. But, Jack, you just have to think in that concentrated area where people are able to participate in one of the world-class athletic events, this will never be the same.
And I should clarify something. These are explosions. There's no confirmation what sort of explosions they are. Of course, they want to investigate. It looks to me like it could have been what I mentioned a moment ago, but I'll just leave it at that, saying explosions happened one after another right along the route of the Boston Marathon, the finish line, as people come streaking down Boylston Street. Now virtually deserted. You can see the stands that are there. That was loaded with people. I'm sort of curious to find out once we get back down to Jonathan and Steve if they're still bringing in victims or if they think they've got them all. Let's go back to Jonathan. He's right at the finish line right now. Jonathan.
Yeah, Jack, we're at the triage center. This is where the normally, again, in a normal race day for Boston Marathon, this big medical tent off to the right-hand side, this big white tent, it's where the runners come who have a cramp, a Charlie horse, having trouble breathing, whatever. So they have a lot of medical personnel here that normally would staff it. And just right after that blast, they were wheeling people in with horrific injuries, the kind that you were talking about the Middle East and seeing bombings. That's exactly wheeling people covered in blood into this tent. You had doctors running from all corners trying to just sprint in here. Let me also tell you this. Here, Gobi, switch over here to this left side here. You have FBI personnel now. They have a task force out here. Here's the other concern, and you'd mentioned this. We had 2 blasts go off. You had the one go off maybe about 45 minutes ago, and then maybe 15 or 10 seconds later, a second blast a couple of blocks up Boylston goes off. They have cleared all of Boylston. They have closed Boylston. They're not quite sure exactly where those bombs were put, set, or how they were detonated. Those are all things they're trying to figure out. So Boylston, that section of it at least, has become a crime scene. And now you have a task force running around here, and they're telling us that they're not quite sure they feel 100% safe with some of the other areas of this area. And in fact, they may tell us to evacuate our live truck and leave it here because they want to start clearing and making sure there aren't any other devices anywhere nearby. We had that concern as well because after the bombs went off and we started to get on television and talking about what had happened, we kept looking around and seeing trash cans and other places that perhaps a device could be planted, and we were a little worried about that. Hang on 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Let me see if I can. Excuse me. Do you have 1 second for us? I appreciate that. And they're extraordinarily busy, as you can imagine. So they've got EMS literally coming from all corners of the city. We've had probably at least 24 ambulances backing in here. They load up, and as quickly as they get loaded up, they're on their way to the hospital. But going back to the initial blast, again, everything was normal. The race was being finished up by some of the runners who were over a 4-hour mark. It was just picturesque. We were even commenting about how the weather has absolutely been cooperative for this marathon. It's been perfect. And all of a sudden, maybe 25 feet, 30 feet just across the street from us, and we were looking that direction because that's the way we were set up, this huge blast. And Brian Foley, the photographer I was with, we all just shook. I mean, our heads were hurting from the blast. And then we look across the street and you see this big white smoke. And initially, everybody didn't know what had happened. And as soon as they got a look at what happened on the sidewalk, as far as the number of people that were on the ground injured and bloody, and I mean people in horrible shape, and that's when the screaming started and people started to run from that area, and that's when you started seeing police and paramedics and some of the firefighters racing towards that area, and they were tearing down. See this fence right here? This fence is lining the whole route. That was blocking basically the victims who were on the sidewalk side from the responders that were coming up the street, so they tore these things down in a hurry, and they got to the victims, and I gotta say, they made very, very quick work with what they had. I mean, they clearly didn't have the tools to take people who had major traumatic injuries, but they sure got it here fast, and they got all those people picked up and brought them to the tent to try and stabilize them. And remember, this is Boston. We have some incredible medical personnel. We had a lot of doctors that showed up quickly to help with this, and so now the process is beginning to get these people to the hospital to see if they can get them patched up, and some of them, I gotta say, were in just horrendous shape. Anyway, Lisa, Come here for a second, if you would. Lisa's joining me. Where we were on the finish line, it was right across the street. Lisa was up on the bridge looking down on the finish line when this blast went off, and it stunned her.
It was the initial explosion with the glass shooting out from the business, and that deafening boom that I just talked to a gentleman threw him to his feet. And then the few seconds where it's registering that something horrible has happened, and then the second blast went off. And at that point, it was chaos, with someone at the bottom of the stairway of the bridge there yelling, "Get down, get down, get down," and everybody running down Boylston Street the other direction.
But we didn't know where to run. That was the other problem. You're thinking if you run one direction, it's like if somebody's coordinating a blast, it's like, where do you go?
Especially given that there had already been a second blast. So are you running right into another dangerous situation? Just talked to a member of the medical team here who said that, they're absolutely traumatized by this. The medical traffic had been non-existent. It was a great day. Very few people suffering any injuries, maybe some blisters, and then this. And they're just doing everything they can to get people out of here as quickly as they can. But, you can see in every direction that we're looking, there are ambulances. The gentleman I just talked to, they took his father to Boston Medical Center. He's from Los Angeles. He's walking there now. He had gone to take a picture of his sister-in-law who was finishing the race. He was with his whole family, and he literally said, "I stepped 15 feet away to get a better shot, and the first blast went off. I turned around, and then as I started to go back, the second blast, his father was injured, conscious, but in and out of consciousness, turning white." He said they were trying to apply pressure to other people's wounds.
Right.
There were police officers there right away, but they didn't get the medical personnel in right away because they didn't need to be there at that point. And he said they couldn't even take him in a wheelchair. They had to literally pick him up on one of the stretchers and run him over here. So he's on his way to Boston Medical Center now.
And I'll never forget the faces. I ran over to the sidewalk to see, what had happened, and then you start to see the victims, and then you start to see the injuries. And, I lifeguarded as a kid, and so, you saw some stuff, but nothing like that. This was unbelievable what we were looking at. And the faces in people, you've seen people go in shock before. Everybody that was up on the sidewalk was absolutely in a state of shock, and you could see it. They had this faraway blank stare as though they had no idea what was going on, and you look right at them, and you're looking at their injuries, and they are absolutely horrific, and they have that faraway, glazed-over look like they have no idea what's going on.
I should point out, when I got here this morning, so I arrived at about 8 o'clock, the bomb-sniffing dogs were at work on the street with the police officers. I also talked to a police officer right at the bottom of the photo bridge who was checking for dirty bombs, for bad air, for any kind of contamination, and said that they would be doing that throughout the course of the race. The problem, of course, is that the sidewalks are open, so they check, they secure it, but then the sidewalks are open, and, the question now, were there other devices that they either were able to intercept, or that they're detonating now? But they definitely began looking for it, and that's why they moved us and everyone off Boylston Street. You know that when a police officer says they're moving us off Boylston Street, you have to go too. It's serious.
And here's the other part of this, too, is we've covered the Boston Marathon for years now, and I know we've done the security aspect of this as well. And I remember talking to officers and saying, look, has there ever been any threats, any credible threats, any, crazy threats? I've never even heard word one about a possible threat. Anytime you have a large gathering of people, clearly that is a specter that is raised. But I've never heard of anything ever. Have you ever heard of a threat being, leveled by somebody that makes its way up the ranks?
The biggest threat here is always the weather. It's, this is one of the, it's all positive. It's all joyous.
Back here a second.
Police officers moving us back so they can get more of these ambulances in here and get more of the victims out. But you're absolutely right. This is not, they're always careful. The FBI is on this course. Police are on this course. There's security for every mile, and certainly here at the finish line and at the start line. But we've never had an incident like this. And what's terrifying for everybody here is that this can happen anywhere. And today it happened to us.
It literally is. It's hard to kind of put your head around, and especially when we were seeing, the triage.
Jonathan, if I can interrupt you for just a second, there's race director Dave McGilvery. I'm going to try to talk to him.
Let's bring him over. Hold on one second. Let's see if we can get him over. Heads up, guys. Watch out. Somebody coming through.
You have to be able to get Dave over.
All right.
Back, guys. So again, we're just watching live pictures. They're bringing more of the injured, and that's the part of it too. Is you initially see some of the horrific injuries that are close to the explosion, and then some will come back a little bit later. They clearly were affected.
You have to understand he's got a lot of protocol that goes through before he talks to the media.
No, I understand. Dave is not only does Dave cover off on every detail of this race, he also runs the race himself after everyone else has left.
That's why we were back out there to take him in, and we couldn't, obviously, when we heard what's going on. So we got a state police escort out was driving 100 miles an hour back into the finish line here. We just got back.
At what point were you intercepted in the
Well,
course?
we were just about to start, okay,
So
out in Hopkinton. Yeah, when we got the word. So it was 2 state police motorcycles that were out there, okay. We got them to escort us right in at 100 miles an hour. We just came in.
Security's always been an issue, a topic, a focus for the marathon organizers. Have you ever had the situation where somebody said, listen, we've had threats over the years. We need to take this stuff seriously. Or is it just one of those things that's kind of, let's just make sure the streets are clear. Let's have the bomb-sniffing dogs do their thing. Or has there ever been a time where you've been working under a threat?
Well, not to my knowledge, okay. But I can't be at liberty to say much, okay. I mean, our planning is very intensive, okay. And everything is included. Believe me, everything is included in our planning. You know, this is just an unfortunate situation. Right?
And the runners have been moved over to ComAv, those runners who were in the area when this happened, and they've been taken to the family meeting place.
Right, that's my understanding. Right, exactly.
Yeah, I should let you know that when the initial blasts went off, the 2 blasts, down Boylston, you saw there were people running there and stopping the runners. They didn't know what had happened. They may have heard it, but they didn't know. And the people were holding up their hands and stopping them. They would not let them pass because, again, at that point, they didn't know if there were going to be more blasts on the route of the track.
They got the word out on the course, too, very quickly. I just talked to someone whose nephew was running near BC. They were able to stop him, and the word went out very, very quickly. I mean, the one thing is that this race is so well organized. The BAA has got so much coverage, and they have 8,500 volunteers on this course. So when they put the word out through law enforcement and through that network of volunteers, they can move people pretty quickly.